For a lot of us, we overthink. I would argue overthinkers are not underfeelers, we're overfeelers. And we
Yeah.
feel so much, we don't know what to do with it. It's uncomfortable. We can't cure it. We can't take it
No.
away because it's part of our system. Our body's feeling and speaking to us. And so I say, I escaped into the confines of my mind where I felt like I had some semblance of control and I could talk myself out of anything. I could overanalyze things till the cows come home. But it was perpetuating my anxiety. And until I learned to really drop back into my body and translate mind and body, allow them to have some synergy, then I was free from a lot of the anxiety that escaping into my mind was causing.
Most of us know what it's like to live in our heads, overthinking, running through to-do lists, reacting before we even realise what we're feeling. But what if the key to feeling calmer and more in control isn't another mindset trick, it's in how we move? My guest today, Erica Hornthal, is a licensed clinical professional counsellor and board-certified dance movement therapist. She's the author of Body Aware, and her work bridges psychology and movement to help people manage stress, anxiety, and disconnection in a holistic and practical way. In our conversation, we talk about how the body responds to pressure long before the mind catches up, how we hold ourselves and our movement patterns can reinforce emotional habits, and how small everyday movements, from how we breathe to how we sit, can change how we feel and think. This conversation is about using the body as the most accessible tool you already have to reset your mind and feel more human again. So, Erica, I've heard you say in the past that many of us end up living in our heads a lot. As in, we're quite disconnected from the bodies that we're in. How have we managed to get to that place, in your opinion?
I think there's really a combination. I think one, it has to do with the overconsumption, overemphasis, over importance, if that's a word, that we place on thought and cognition and even cognitive intelligence, right? IQ, our intellectual quotient. And that's through our educational systems, which I am not knocking, but we are so much more information and visually based than we are somatically and experientially based. I know in the United States, especially, a lot of schools are going towards a more social, emotionally based curriculum, which is great. But it's like, why? How did we get here? How
Yeah.
did we get where we have to build in social and emotional connection? That's what learning should be.
Yeah.
So environmentally, there's so much stuff going on that we just can't process. Like, we're not meant to be cognitively and just consciously aware of all of the strife and struggle and even trauma. And so it's really an escape. Oftentimes we escape into what feels safe, which ironically becomes our mind. And we don't feel safe to be in the present because what we're experiencing is so overwhelming. So
Yeah.
while we can never truly disconnect from our bodies, we can cut off the awareness of the pain and the struggle and the intense stress that we feel. And so we escape into our minds. We also sit for a great portion of the day nowadays. And it's as if we are literally turning off the switch below the neck and just focusing on what our minds can do. And I think it's ironic because sometimes we interchange mind with brain, but brain is actually part of the body. Mind is almost it's not separate. It's almost like its own entity, right? We can't
Mm.
qualify where the mind is. Some people feel it in their gut. Some people, for me personally, it's like
Yeah.
a cloud kind of over my head. Um, but we've really prioritized that. And so one of the things that I, love talking about, get to talk about with you today is just how movement can help us settle back into the body so we can escape the confines of our minds.
It's interesting what you say about escape into our minds? Because I would imagine that a lot of people listening would say, oh, it doesn't feel like freedom in the mind. Because obviously, when you have that stillness, but also that massive external input that we're talking about that is coming at us from all angles in ways that it really wasn't even just a few decades ago. I see that that is then creating anxiety in people,
Mhm.
and a loss of joy, and obviously, as we're saying, also a loss of connection. And so, actually, when we have this sort of retreat to our minds, it's not even a great place to be for many. Would you agree?
100%. Yeah. It's almost like ironic. Like I hear myself say it that we escape into the mind. And there is that thought of like, but that doesn't feel safe, actually, right? It kind of perpetuates or exacerbates some of the anxiety that we feel. And the only way that I can describe it or that I understand it myself personally is that at some point I was either made to feel less than or ridiculed or criticized for some form of expression, I'm not talking in ways of like a traumatic experience, but for those of us listening, it could be, I drew something that someone thought, oh, that looks terrible, and so I learned not to draw anymore.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's more the praise. If someone says, wow, that's amazing, then I'm like, okay, I'm doing a great job and keep doing it. And in the absence of praise, I criticize myself and I say, that's not good enough. You didn't do a good enough job. You shouldn't be doing this anymore. So at some point, I perceive that as criticism. I criticize myself and I escape into my mind where I can feel like I can make sense of something. It's a way for me anyway to feel like I have a sense of control. And I
Yeah.
think for a lot of us, we overthink. I would argue overthinkers are not underfeelers, we're overfeelers. And we
Yeah.
feel so much, we don't know what to do with it. It's uncomfortable. We can't cure it. We can't take it
No.
away because it's part of our system. Our body's feeling and speaking to us. And so I say, I escaped into the confines of my mind where I felt like I had some semblance of control and I could talk myself out of anything. I could overanalyze things till the cows come home. But it was perpetuating my anxiety. And until I learned to really drop back into my body and translate mind and body, allow them to have some synergy, then I was free from a lot of the anxiety that escaping into my mind was causing.
And so you're talking about childhood, I presume, mainly, and sort of that process of growing up. Would you
Mhm.
say that that is the experience of a lot of young people at the moment, particularly?
I think so. Yeah, I think so a lot. Especially because maybe my generation or a little bit older is the one raising the children, right? And so we're kind of coming into our own, trying to take control in a healthy way of our mental health.
Yeah.
How do you do that at the same time trying to rear and mentor and support the children in the household doing the same thing,
Yeah.
giving ourselves permission to make mistakes and giving them permission to make mistakes. Like it's really hard. So I know for me, as I've been raising children, it's kind of in a cliche, it's cliche and maybe a little cheesy, but like a rebirth for me. Like
Yeah.
so much of what I experienced comes back up for me through their experience,
Right.
and not to place too much pressure on them, obviously, but to really manage my own stuff. So, yeah, it's
Yeah.
extremely demanding and complicated for kids today.
They have a way of holding a mirror up.
Yes, yes. Even
and,
if they
and
don't look exactly like you, right?
No, exactly. They have a when they know you in a different way to an adult, and
Mhm,
they can certainly express themselves, and they don't let you get away with anything, which is great
mm-mm.
because I suppose you could just deny seeing that, or perhaps feel less able to see it, or you can choose to use that as good information. that
Yes.
perhaps adults will never give you, but really want to.
Right, right. And you
um,
can turn that off too. I can turn off
yeah,
the sensations and the awareness, the transference that I feel when my kids are going through something. I
yeah.
choose not to. I choose to lean into it, but I have to do it in a way um that allows me to remain as regulated as I can, to flow through those states. So when I get dysregulated, I know what to do with it. And that's not always possible, but we can have that open dialogue with our experience, with our sensations, and help ourselves through things so that we can help them through things.
And tell me just what you describe what you mean by dysregulation in those situations, because although we're
Sure.
talking about interactions with children, it's interactions, isn't it? It's interactions in general.
Yes. I know dysregulation is kind of a hot topic, a trendy word these days, at least on social media. For me, dysregulation is a disruption. It feels like an activation. It's almost like a just a splash of really cold water to the face.
Right.
It's just like a oh, okay.
Yeah.
It really interrupts what I think I should be doing or what I actually am doing. And it almost feels like you can't really focus on anything else but that.
Yeah.
And again, we can lean into it and ask kind of what's happening? What am I experiencing right now?
And what do you what how would you describe that experience physiologically?
The dysregulation or the coming back
Mm.
back
No,
into.
sorry, the dysregulation. So you
Sure.
say, as you know, cold water in the face, which is a great example, and people use the word being triggered,
Hmm,
where
hmm.
there's a sudden change in how you feel. What sort of feelings would you say so that people can recognize what that
Sure.
is?
Honestly, I feel like it depends a little bit on the situation. I know we're very prone to identifying our pattern of fight or flight or freeze or fawn. It really depends sometimes on the situation for me. And thankfully, to a colleague and now friend, Dr. Kathleen Hendricks, she identifies what she calls fear melters and our fear signature. So I've actually been able to kind of work with that a little bit and understand, like, okay, what's happening for me? Sometimes it feels like that shock that just I cannot move. I feel my heart racing, almost like my feet are in cement. Like I would
Yeah,
love to move. I would love to run away from here, but I am stuck. And other times it's very much this almost like fire in my chest that makes me want to like rise to the occasion, right? And for me, that's my fight. That's my whole, they are not getting away with this, right? I'm going to let them know how I feel. That doesn't come out as much as the
that's
freeze
good.
does.
Well, that's probably
But
a good
sometimes
thing.
it's a combination. And so did I always know that? No, I just identified it as one or the other. And it was like, oh, I'll just calm down. But to understand the patterns that come up in my body, the movement patterns, the signature that's there, that's what allows me to actually dialogue, talk with it a bit, and then use movement to help rewire,
Right.
reclaim, or, yeah, reclaim my movement, reclaim my patterns of movement.
So part of the reason also for the question is because
Yeah.
when we have disconnected to an extent from how our body feels, or using our body to help us feel, it's those moments where we have that sharp, strong message from the body.
Hmm.
And I think it's really fascinating. And obviously, it's in response to how your mind has perceived something that's
Sure.
coming, whether that's a physical threat, or something someone said, or whatever, or a fear of something, anticipation of something. But I think everyone can recognize the sort of the shock feelings, the feelings you
Mhm.
weren't expecting, because and then the physical symptoms, almost is the strange word, but that are in reaction to that.
Yeah.
Um, and that's, I think, a really powerful way of leading into this conversation, because you and I talked before about how movement is uh, a language for our body. It's a
Mhm.
way of speaking to us, which could sound a little woo woo to some. And yet, it's a really important to try and stay open minded to sort of grasp this, because I'm sure, having just listened to what you said about that response, everyone will identify with that. Absolutely
Mhm.
everyone. It's very difficult to not have that. And that's because that's our body's emergency system, in a sense, at its extreme,
Yeah.
kicking in and saying, no, you have to stop now,
Yeah.
or what, or whatever that is. So talk to me a little bit about sort of that language, and particularly with movement. A lot of people find that they're quite fearful
Mhm.
of moving, or certain movements. They confine themselves to a narrow, limited range of movements that
Mhm.
they or their body are deeming as safe, but are nervous of speaking the full language. And you and I talked before about, movement was your first language, actually, the first way of expressing yourself.
Mhm.
So talk to us a little bit about that movement as a language in response, as we just talked about.
Yeah. You know, uh, to speak to what you said just a few moments ago, the woo woo, right? Because I hear that a lot, especially as a dance movement therapist. And not that we're claiming what we're talking about is, but it's easy to hear, oh, language of the body, oh, body keeps the score, and think like, okay, I don't know if I buy into that. So what I always want to remind people, right, is that we all move. Movement's always happening, and the language of the body isn't necessarily this, transformative kind of, it's not always spiritual. For some people it is. I don't i don't experience it as this message. It is quite literally me learning to just tap into and pay attention to sensation. And other
Right.
people may experience it differently. I just wanted to make that distinction, that sometimes people are like, language? I don't know. My body doesn't say anything to me. It's like, it
Perfect.
does. It does. Think about, when you were a kid and you got cut, and you're like, this is the worst thing ever. And you're crying, and someone's like, it's not that bad. You're fine. It's okay.
Mm.
Okay, I guess it's not that bad, right? And so we learn to silence those sensations and those signals. So this is an invitation to reclaim whatever your pain is, whatever it feels like, and to not allow someone to minimize that experience, which is really hard because we've spent a lot of our lives being minimized in that way. So for me, yeah, language of the body is our first language, as you mentioned. We've talked about that. And what I mean is, quite literally, before we spoke any words, we made sounds. Most of our communication is through rhythm, is through reflexes, it's through nonverbal communication, and that's still the same. We communicate 85, sometimes even 90% through nonverbal communication.
Yeah.
It's the tone and the actual words that make up, 10-ish% of our communication. But once we have this cognitive ability to explain or express ourselves through words, we really, again, minimize, kind of mitigate the use of the body and communication, nonverbal language. So that looks a lot of different ways. It's the sensation. It's going back to the five senses, looking beyond those: proprioception, interoception, introspection. All the shuns. Our awareness of where we are in space, our awareness of time. There's something like 22. I've heard even more senses
Wow.
of the body. We don't tap into them. Our vestibular senses. Um, we kind of accept that as we age, we're going to lose some of these senses. And I just don't think that has to be the case. But we have to engage with them. That's the
Yeah.
language I'm talking about. You know,
Yeah.
yeah, it can be affirmations, love your body, talk to your body. I'm quite literally just talking about what the body feels. And when we're so turned off from that or disconnected from it, thinking about connecting to what could be pain is very scary, and we don't want to do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Absolutely. We want to uh, avoid it at all costs.
Yes,
But
yes,
but I
myself
think that,
included. I've definitely been there. So it's
of
like,
course, everyone has, because when that's human learning, when we hurt ourselves, um, If we cut ourselves on a knife, we're perhaps a little bit more careful the next time, etc. That's the way that we learn as
Yep,
we
yep.
age. But also when it's bigger injury or something worse, we then create potentially an unhealthy fear that then limits our
Yes.
movement patterns because our brain is bracing the body to say, don't go near this. And yet
Yes.
that then limits the way we move, in terms of the way that we need to move. So the basic levels of function where we are using our joints to their wider ranges, we are getting impact through our bones that we need. We are using our musculature to fire all the different systems in our bodies. All of these things, some of them are reduced, and therefore
Yeah.
our health in general is can't be as optimal because we're
Yeah.
not giving it those inputs that are needed.
Yeah, and I think the piece I always like to really bring home is that when we limit our range of motion, we inherently limit our range of emotion. So
Ah,
when you're limiting, and that's not even just not moving, but like you said, when you're only doing certain movements, same exercise at the gym day in and day out,
yep.
you are repatterning your body to only move in certain ways, which means emotions will only flow through so much, or they'll get stuck, you know. Oh, well, I don't think it's a coincidence that a lot of us who are high functioning, um we'll say, um, we have we have high functioning anxiety, are also very prone to high intensity workouts. Like, they go hand in hand. So
Yeah.
to train our body to slow down and also take, you know, uh, a yoga class, Pilates, a slow walk in the forest. It's not easy, but it's not easy for a reason. We need a robust movement vocabulary, not just for our physical health, but ultimately for our mental health.
Yeah, that's so true. I think that message needs to get loud and clear to an awful lot of people.
It's my
And
hope. Yeah.
and then the issues that we have are that the messaging is often, go harder, get sweaty, push, push, push. And
Yeah.
yet a lot of people are pushing so hard in their work or whatever that the stress levels are through the roof. And actually often there feels like there's a comfort in that high level of
Hmm.
exercise because it's familiar, and yet the sleep's poor.
Hmm.
Emotional issues, mental health issues, and yet those people are thinking, "But I'm doing everything I should be. But I'm doing everything to the nth degree that I should be," and yet it's the exact opposite. So if someone is in that position, how how do they start to move into the sort of finding what regulation feels like, how they lower down this sort of frenetic um, feeling and feel comfortable in a space that is calmer?
Yeah. This is when I go to just the kind of stereotypical, almost cliche awareness, where it isn't, I know the go-to is to like automatic change, right? Okay, well, what do I do? Give me something to do. How do I get out of this? And especially when I'm working with clients, so much of it is just building awareness. You know, can you create awareness around when you feel that way? Or then take a step back. What were you doing right before you started feeling that way? A lot of what I do is kind of a adapted movement analysis. So we're looking at what are the patterns of your movement, what feels familiar. One of the planes in which we move is called sagittal, so we move forward and back. And so many clients, time and time again, feel so comfortable and miserable at the same time moving forward. And just exploring the back, walking backwards, stopping, pausing, these different um explorations in what I just keep referring to as a movement pattern or rhythm is enough for people to start making those changes without a prescription, right?
Yeah,
Without move this way 5 times, 3 times a week, tell me how you
absolutely.
feel, we'll check back in. It becomes your own blueprint. Like you get to recognize what does and doesn't feel good, what's automated and what's like, ooh, I gotta learn this a little bit more. I'm gonna practice this.
Yes.
That's the moment. That's so it's the
Yeah.
awareness. And then if someone says, now what? I noticed I did this 50 times over the course of 48 hours. Now what? What do
Yeah.
I do? And I tell people like we got to challenge it. So we got to become aware, we got to challenge it. So if your shoulders are hunched,
Yeah.
challenge them by expanding a little bit, dropping them, take a breath, roll them out a few times, right? That can take a while.
That's a great example, shoulders, because that is where people hold so
Oh,
much
yeah, it's
tension.
my go-to.
And obviously from keyboards and so on. And it is amazing where, particularly if you're coaching a class and you say, and just watch that you're not lifting your shoulders out half the room kind of thing. Oh yeah, I didn't know I was doing it. And it's that exactly as you say, awareness is it is being aware of your autopilot,
Yes.
being aware of what you're unconscious of
Yeah.
doing,
Yes.
just switching that flicking that switch, even switching that
So hard.
flicking that switch is so difficult. But it's interesting because once you've switched it, and it's incredible how much more that awareness leads to of,
Mhm.
oh, I'm doing that with my shoulders, but oh yeah, it's also affecting my breath. I'm when I drop my shoulders, I'm breathing lower down. I'm breathing more in my diaphragm, and up here it's creating tension, and I'm breathing and that, just those two things, as you say,
Yeah.
dropping the shoulders and the effect that that can have on helping breathe into the depth of the lungs, that alone has a huge impact on your physiology. It's
Yep.
so calming. It can
Yes.
help you in moments of sort of panic and fear, because you realize that your body is in protection mode. And actually, if we face this more
Mm.
open, lowered, and calm, and with enforced almost relaxation,
Yeah.
that can help to deal with situations. So although it feels like or sounds like the smallest thing, it's amazing how powerful that is.
Oh, yeah. And I want people to understand that even when the awareness comes in and then the next stage of kind of challenging that, it's going to be uncomfortable and
Right.
not necessarily jarring or triggering as we mentioned before, but the go-to is going to be for your body to go right back where it was because it's familiar. And
Yeah.
our brain's not wired for happiness. It's wired for familiarity. It's wired for
Yeah.
safety. It's wired for comfort. So even if you say, "Oh, this is better for me," it's going to feel weird for your brain. And until you repeat that over and over again and build in those new neuronal pathways, it's going and then when we have times of stress or ultimately trauma, we are going to revert back to those patterns again because
Yeah.
there is that sensation of like safety. And I always want people to know um, that that is a normal process. You know, it's very easy, my clients included, to go to like, oh, I failed. Oh, I
Yes.
went back. Oh,
All or
it
nothing.
happened again. Right. And I'm like, that's what it's supposed to do. It's okay. Like, listen to it. That is the listening, right? Notice what
Yes.
happened. And the last piece for me is the expression or the expansion of that movement. So after I've worked with clients for a little bit and they're like, wow, I found this freedom in my body again. I'm not stuck in my mind all the time. The expansion and the expression is like, I went and took this belly dancing class. And I'm like, belly dancing? What? We've never done that before. There, I know, but it just something called to me to try this, you know, and I realized how I wasn't moving my hips enough and I was feeling really stiff and it was amazing, you know, or someone will take up an instrument or
Yeah.
write a novel. It's like the amount of creativity that flows through us when we learn to move our body for mental and physical health is
Yeah.
unbelievable. And our creativity only increases as we age, but we need to practice it. We need to exercise those muscles.
So let's talk about sort of movement, creative movement. So the
Sure.
one end of the scale is exactly what you've just said, where you are responding to something that's happening regularly. So talk about the shoulders lifting again,
Mhm.
and we bring them down and we sort of feel like, are we having to hold them down? Where should my arms sit? And so on. And as you say, that can be uncomfortable for people initially.
Mhm.
And the reminder that you gave us, the great reminder that every time they go back up is another opportunity
Mhm.
to be relearning.
Mhm.
Um, and each time you're not in your head, you're thinking about how your body feels. So you're making that connection
Yeah.
over and over. So every time you go wrong, in inverted commas, is an opportunity. Every problem that is happening is a solution in disguise, as they say. So
Mhm.
you're relearning and speaking with that, making that connection and that discussion with your body. I hope you're enjoying the conversation. I'm just taking a quick break to ask you a question. Have you started to notice that the everyday things you used to do without thinking, like getting up off the floor, lifting the shopping, or hopping over a stile, now take more effort than you feel they should? Well, if your answer is yes, you are far from alone. And I'm excited to tell you that I've written a book to help you. It's called Move Well for Life: Unlock the Life-Changing Power of Everyday Movement. As you'll know from listening to this podcast or following me online, I don't talk about chasing fitness trends or imposing rigid routines. Instead, my message is all about learning how small, natural movements woven into your daily life can help you feel stronger, more confident, and ready for whatever life throws at you. Move Well for Life is available to pre-order now, and it's out in January here in the UK and Europe, and later next year in America. You can find the link in the show notes to read more about it, or simply search Move Well for Life and Wendy online. I firmly believe that every movement counts, and it's never too late to reclaim yours. Now, back to the episode. When you are wanting to go further, because once you've done that for a while, it starts to feel more comfortable. You start to
Mhm.
notice other things in your body. You start to feel like your body perhaps is saying, yeah, my hips are stiff. And you realize that stiffness in your hips is not just a pain and it's not good and I just need to do a stretch and then get it away, but you start to think, how can I move to feel better in that area? And you talked about belly dancing, which is one extreme
Mhm.
for sure.
Sure.
um, but no, but a lovely example. But what about just starting to embrace movement more? So if we talk a little bit more about dance movement therapy,
Mhm.
because people listening will many of them will know about the fact that I coach natural movement, and one of our links was to do with early developmental patterns, because I noticed that when some clients go back down to the floor and when we do rocking and crawling and so on, it can be a very emotional
Mhm.
experience for them, and unexpectedly so. They don't expect to have sort of surges of emotion arising because it's something they haven't done for a very long time.
Yeah.
And there is a connection to their past. So speak a little bit about that, but also about your world.
Sure. So I guess I'll start with the dance movement therapy piece, because that's ultimately what brought me to really talking more about this paradigm in terms of, the way we move influencing how we think and feel. Because so much of what we experience now is thought influences behavior, which is true, but we forget that movement influences thought, which then influences behavior. It's just this cycle, right? Which then influences more movement. So, I think it's really important for, as a dance movement therapist, for me to be with people, one, where they are, but two, in almost their assumptions, their well, not miss their interpretations of what movement is. So years ago now, I remember just starting to ask the question, how are you moving? Right. And that kind of opened up for the discussion of, what is movement? What is movement to you? And for the most part, a lot of people responded with exercises. Well, I didn't move today. I haven't gotten to the gym. And I was like, okay, but how did you get to my office? Oh, I drove here. I'm like, okay, well, what movement did you have to do to drive? Our awareness and interpretation of movement is based on our ability. And the only time that we really start to remember all of the steps that go into what we have to do is when we're limited, is when something changes the system, and then we infer, oh, I can't do that anymore. So as an example, I use the example of brushing your teeth. Most of us just think toothpaste on the brush, in the mouth, brush my teeth. There are so many steps that have to go into actually brushing your teeth. We might not realize it because it's so easy for a lot of us. But when it's not easy anymore, you realize how much executive functioning and how much physical stress, motion, energy it takes to do some of these things. So I know we talked a little bit about Katie Bowman's work, and I think what I really value most, there's a lot, but one of the things that really stuck with me is this idea of stacking. And I think for a lot of us, we can start to engage in more movement in the activities we're already doing, right? So brushing your teeth as an example. If you want to feel more grounded and balanced, you don't have to wait to get to the gym. You can practice putting your feet on the floor, feeling the weight of your body while you're brushing your teeth. You can lean into the countertop for a little bit more stability. We want to look at the ways we're moving because that influences the way we move through life. So as a dance therapist, that's really important to me. It's not just me dancing is really powerful, but it isn't always me dancing with a client. We're actually looking at how are we currently moving? What movement patterns are absent from our day-to-day life? What psychosomatic symptoms are present, right? How does my stress manifest? And what can I be doing to actually start supporting that feeling? So maybe I wasn't aware that I spend all my day with my shoulders up to my earlobes. But the moment I become aware of it and I train myself to just make some space between my ears and my shoulders, like you said, it has a huge impact on the rest of our body. It seems very small, but it is that micro movement has a huge impact. So while not every dance movement therapist or psychotherapist is going to engage in that way, that has been such a game changer for me in my practice, in my life, and obviously in, the clients that I get to meet with. It's really these micro movements because we only see movement as big.
Yeah.
The 3 hours I spend at the gym, the marathon that I'm running this weekend. What about the movement that allows us to be human? The movement of connection, relation, digestion, consumption, sleep, breathing, like it took me working with older adults who were pretty much near to the end of their life, who were also living with terminal illness, degenerative diseases, for me to realize how much movement I do every day. I was like, oh yeah, I got myself dressed. I haven't thought about that since I was 3 because I take it for granted.
Yeah. So much is on autopilot. And as you say, we take these things for granted until we can't, as you said. And that was a huge thing for me when I suddenly went from running to chronic pain and immobility and struggling with so many things, and I had such a lack of trust for I had literally taken it completely for granted until that point, and look back and really wished I hadn't. And it's interesting because often we have got signals, whether you want to call it language, signals, voice, whatever.
Yeah.
But there are things when we look back, as I did in that moment, that were calling out to me. And I think we are really good at ignoring those signals, numbing off to them, to put them for later because it's not going to come to anything, or it'll sort itself out, and so on. And yet when those signals, so for example, a continual low-lying nagging pain that happens as a response to something regularly, but then perhaps subsides, but keeps coming back, which was my case. And you may go for some treatment, but if you get the wrong kind of treatment, particularly, it's symptomatic treatment rather than root cause finding.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's really hard to find the root cause because, as we're talking about today, it's about so much more than just how well your body's functioning. It's also the connection with your brain and how you're feeling emotionally. It's all one big package, but that's very hard to delve into when it's
Yeah.
just a small symptom. But what I would say is, I think it's so important to go to the level that you're talking about, where we really do think about um, sort of giving our bodies permission to talk to us, to say,
Hmm.
this is regularly wrong. Please, could you go and do a bit of investigation here?
Yeah.
Because the long run, as it was for me, could be something quite severe, a severe stop, and then, 4 years of chronic pain completely unexpectedly and
Mm.
from literally nowhere. And
Yeah.
no one thinks that that's going to happen to them tomorrow. No one. I
Yeah.
certainly didn't go into that. Um, so I think you're absolutely right that it's starting to really think about how you're feeling in the everyday is
Yeah.
just as important
Yeah.
as a response to some big mode of exercise. But a lot of people aren't doing that, and a lot of people are moving less. But that's it's not so bad. It's really important to exercise. But for me, the foundation always comes from movement. And I think
Yeah.
movement, we were talking earlier about regulation, but particularly when you get into moments in your life, you talked before about trauma. And as we go through life, there are always going to be things that happen. There's
Hmm.
nothing more certain than change. And these curveballs will always be thrown at regular or irregular intervals, and so we need to be ready for when they hit, and we
Yeah.
need to respond. And I think what you're talking about, where we are developing that self trust, is a really important way to help us become more resilient in those moments.
Yes, absolutely. I think as you're talking, I was just thinking we can't wait for things to be easy to move.
Right.
I can't wait for that headache to, go away on its own to move. And when I say move, I don't mean exercise. I mean maybe it is to get up and get myself hydrated, medication, turn off the lights because they're blinding. It's like
Mm.
again, it's not just exercise. And for me it's not just the movement, it's the execution. How am I going about doing these things? We kind of just take the movement for what it is, especially when it's exercise, and don't necessarily give ourselves permission to execute it in a way that feels necessary for us in that moment.
Yeah.
So, some again, as you were talking, something that comes to mind a lot for me is I like to use movement as metaphor, because there's a lot of, not only is there a lot of symbolism there, but in a lot of the work that I've done, it really hits home for a lot of people. So as a brief example, I've worked with quite a few people, but one in particular, I remember talking about the emotional experience of bending over backwards for people. Right? We've heard that expression. I
Yeah.
bend over backwards. Sometimes we hear it as people pleasing. But in particular, this woman had come to me and she said, "Oh, before we start moving, I just want you to know that I have a very," she called it a bad back, which I always find interesting that we think body parts that don't perform the way we want them to are bad.
Bad.
So she said, "I
Yeah.
have a bad back." And I said, "Whoa, wait a minute. What's your relationship to that?" And she's like, "Oh, well, I've always been super flexible. As a kid, I was doing back bends all the time and gymnastics." And I just remember asking her, "Do you think that your flexibility, particularly in your back, has anything to do with how you please people today? You're bending over backwards for people." And she just stopped dead in her tracks and started crying, which I was not expecting.
Yeah.
But she was like, "I think it has everything to do with it." Obviously, there's physiological things there too, but that emotional component was the reason she was there. She was like, "I don't take care of myself. I don't put myself first. I've lost who I am. I don't know my identity at this point." She was a young mom and just had lost that connection to herself, and she was limiting her movement because she was experiencing so much physical pain. So, metaphors in movement are super powerful, and you can do that yourself. Notice how many times you use movement language to describe something. You
Mm.
know, um, uh, again, that bending over backwards or pain in the rear end, right? There's so
Yeah.
many ways that we use movement and the body to describe an emotional experience, but then we don't investigate it.
Yeah. That's so true. I'm going to be watching out for that now, um,
Yeah.
because you do, you sort of, you listen to yourself, and as you say, back to that negativity where we hear ourselves saying these negative things about ourselves. So
Mhm.
we're hearing it externally from others at certain points, but we're also hearing it ourselves. The way we
Yeah.
speak about ourselves to others can be so negative. And as you mentioned, a bad back.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's no room for improvement there.
Right. It's
Bad
just
is
labeled
bad.
as bad, and then you're
It's
never gonna
done.
interact with it the same way, right? My
Yeah.
bad knee. I'm like, so which is, oh, so that's the good knee? I'm like, what, how does, you're punishing your body, and then
Yeah.
exercise becomes the more punishment.
Yeah.
It's like I have to rehab this part of my body because it doesn't perform the way it's supposed to. It's like it sounds very, this is woo woo, I think, of me, but it's like you have to love that part. You have to allow it to
Yeah.
exist in
Yeah.
the way it is right now, and then it will return, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it won't look exactly like the other knee because it's been through stuff, but it doesn't have to be ostracized forever. It doesn't have to be known as the bad part.
And it has to be recognized as part of an entire system. We're
Yes.
so good at
Yes.
separating out each bit,
Right.
as if it's not got any relationship to the bit next, and we can't. It's almost impossible to move any body part without getting other parts involved, particularly our nervous system. Clearly, they're all,
Right.
and therefore they're friends and neighbors, and it's really important that we get them to all work in harmony. And part of that
Yeah.
is by, and I think that's the thing, when you, particularly if you're protecting a body part that's been in pain, noticing that you're doing that and noticing that you're perhaps compensating by shifting weight away more often than not, things like that. It's really important to notice that, bring the awareness in, but also through gentle movement, trusting, coming back to center,
Yeah.
seeing how it does feel to use it more normally again, and allowing that sort of stability to come back in the body. Because when we protect and compensate, so many other things are going, oh, we're holding you up because we
Yeah.
can't cope with the fact that you're permanently on a lean and so on, and and just, but doing it in a gentle, careful way. I
Yeah.
was going to come on to talking about how we start that reconnection. So we've talked about awareness,
Mhm.
but in your dance movement therapy, so explain, people are probably crying out, what does she mean by dance movement therapy? Because it's not coming into a room and just having a boogie and walking out again. That's
Right. Although
that's
that's fun, but I
that's a
would do that
great thing to
too.
do. And you know what? Find the room and go for it, because it's brilliant for
Yes.
you. But just explain to us a little bit what you do for someone, and why they come to you in the first place, if you see what I mean.
Sure.
What is it that makes them think, oh, that person is for me, or that modality is for me?
Yeah. Um, so the way I like to describe or explain dance movement therapy is that first and foremost, it is a psychotherapeutic approach that brings all of our movement, body awareness, nonverbal communication, rhythm, movement patterns, um, into the therapeutic relationship, right? You're working in accordance with a therapist into the therapeutic relationship, ultimately to integrate, right? Our minds, our bodies, our souls, or our spirits, to improve our functioning, right? Our emotional functioning, but also oftentimes our physical functioning. So it's not a physical therapy. It's not kinesiology. I'm not manipulating. I'm not realigning. All of the movement is coming from the client, and the movement can be small, it can be a gesture, a posture, a micro movement, a breath. And then, yeah, sometimes with clients we are mobilizing our bodies in ways that look like a boogie, right? Look like a dance. We've got music going on. It depends on why the person's there to begin with. So leading into that, why do people come see me? um Sometimes it's purely because I take their insurance. That's a big thing in America. So they're like, oh, I didn't even
Oh.
know you were a dance therapist, but you're in my network. So I'm like, okay, we'll work on that. But it is either because someone has reached a plateau in what they feel like is traditional talk therapy, and they know that their body is holding stuff, and they've gotten really good at either not talking about it or they just don't have the words. There are no words to express what they are feeling. I've also worked with people who quite literally cannot speak. They don't have the language to do so. But again, the body has its own language. And so we can communicate in that way, whether it's someone that speaks a different language than me or someone maybe with, differing abilities, sensory motor processing issues, or maybe on the spectrum. And of course, there are people that just love the idea of using dance and movement to
Yeah.
better their mental health, so it really runs the gamut. Now it's mostly individuals who recognize that they are completely disconnected from their felt experience and they're going through immense stress, a job or a career that they're unhappy with. It might be a divorce, recent birth, postpartum. They're in a life change and therefore their movement has changed and they want to reclaim whatever they feel like they've lost. We do that through movement patterns.
Amazing. I mean, it just, I'm not sure how available it is in the UK. Is it a big thing? To be honest, I hadn't come across it until I came across you. I know
Yeah,
that there is dance therapy, but
sure.
um
That's like
it's from
retail
a different,
therapy. It's like chocolate
right.
therapy. So we use dance to feel better, right? If you're using something
Yes.
to feel better, we usually throw therapy at the end of it. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's why I was like struggling with saying the word therapy, because when you're using therapy in your terms, it's a very, very different thing.
Yeah.
And
Well, actually,
you've trained for many years to get to that point.
yeah, well, actually, in the UK, parts of Europe, the NHS especially actually recognizes it as dance movement psychotherapy. So
Right.
DMP.
That.
I don't know why we didn't adopt that in the United States, and it's a lot harder
Mm,
because yeah, you hear therapy and it feels a little bit more like, oh yeah, I could call myself that. Sure, therapy just feels better. But there are actually quite a few practitioners, maybe even in your backyard. So if people listening are
yeah.
closer to your neck of the woods or anywhere else in the world outside of the United States, there
Mm,
actually are so many dance movement therapists practicing. We've kind of changed our names, or we adopt, we might have other licensures or other credentials that we have to rely on sometimes. But yeah, if you're interested, all you have to do is a little internet search. There are
absolutely.
associations all over the world for different countries, different continents. You may be surprised to find that there are dance therapists actually very close to you. So I always appreciate when people say, I've never heard of this until you said it.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons I like to have these conversations because I want people to know about it. But it
Absolutely.
it only starts there, right? It's like it is not just me. I cannot service everybody, right? And for good reason.
Yeah.
Therapy is about the relationship, and I'm not going to be everybody's cup of tea, and that's
Mm,
okay. You need
yeah.
to find a therapist that you relate to, that you feel comfortable with, and that you can have a secure interaction with. And some
I
of us
think
do
that,
work
sorry.
virtually, so you don't have to be in person with someone if that is, more in line with what you need.
I do think the name, um, dance, psychotherapy,
Mhm.
the psychotherapy makes it, to me, more intriguing. That makes me ask the
Mm.
question more. Whereas when it's just dance therapy, dance movement therapist, it's
It's
I
confusing.
well, also, I sort of have expectations.
Mm.
I think I know what it is, and I don't necessarily, because you clearly, the way you described it, and from our previous conversations, I was like, whoa, this is a whole new world, and what a
Sure.
brilliant world, because it's incredible way of it's so holistic. I love how holistic it is, because the reality is, people have heard me talk before. I didn't start to really improve from my chronic pain until I went through a bit of a mental shift where I stopped fighting so hard
Mm.
against my body, and with the frustration and anger about what had happened, and started to fully accept where I was,
Mhm.
surrender some of those, and, as you would say, leaned into some of those emotions that were arising that I was really suppressing.
Yeah.
When I
Yeah.
started to do that, things started to unfurl, and I could only see that 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 finding that came through desperation.
Mm.
It wasn't I was looking for, and it came. It was a book someone gave me, 2 books, in fact, that people gave me, and they opened my eyes. And that's why these conversations are so important as well, to say,
Yeah.
there are other paths, there are other ways, and there are such a range of amazing modalities. Not all as holistic as that, that's for sure. But
Sure.
it's trying, learning, listening, being open, being curious that will help you move forward on a path ultimately. So,
Yeah.
to leave our listeners with a sort of a little tip
Mhm.
about connecting in with themselves, you made the lovely sort of, you almost posed the question, although it was to your normal clients, about how are you moving today, and actually getting to the granular level of just simply moving. And I will often say to clients, list all the ways that you've moved today, and it's a similar thing where
Mhm.
you will get obvious exercise of, well, I walked for this much, I did this many steps, and so on.
Yes.
And then when you bring it back to the, no, I got out of bed, I
Yes, yeah.
was, I put one shoe on, I did it. Wow, the list is long. And
Right,
the
so you're
list
like, "Wow, you did a lot today."
is a lot today, and appreciate your body for that, because wow,
Yeah.
look how much we functioned in the world. But beyond that, what's one sort of leave the listeners with a little prod, a prompt, to get
Sure.
them further along that thinking journey?
Yeah. So a bunch of things come to mind. I did in a sense already share. I call it acing your mental health. So just that reminder of like becoming aware of our movement, challenging it in some way. We talked about dropping our shoulders, and then expanding it. Okay, maybe now I do 3 shoulder rolls, or I stretch my arms. Gosh, I wasn't even stretching my shoulders. Now I'm stretching my whole upper body. So just that reminder of kind of acing our mental health. But exercise wise, my favorite thing to impart or share with people is the power of the lean. You talked about, like I say, lean into things, especially when we feel like we are in a bit of a chaotic situation. We can't control what's going on in our world or our environment. Learn to lean into um, a stable part, right? Like lean against the wall with your back, or push your hands into the wall, rather than sitting in the middle of a room with no support. See if you can sit against the wall,
Or lay
because
on the ground. I
yes, or lay on
always
the ground.
encourage people to lay
Yes,
flat on the ground. It's the
yes, that is
most
support too.
wonderful support.
It
Yes.
is. So that reminder physically, we don't even have an intention for it. You just want your body to feel supported from the outside in and the inside out. And so you don't even have to understand why. But if you feel at some point like, I just need to lay down, and you can do it.
Do it.
Maybe not in the middle of the street, but I will do that. I'll be in my office waiting for a client, and I'm like, I just need to lay down for a minute, and then
Mm.
sometimes they'll join me as they're coming in. So the power of the lean into something, and then you'll start to feel what it feels like to move away and be supporting yourself, right?
Mhm.
And it may be a struggle. We might be like, "Ugh, all right, here I go again." But over time, you actually feel what we haven't felt in a long time as kids, right? For those of us who were able to stand on our own 2 feet and take our own walk our own steps, we've lost that connection. We forget how important it is to stand on your own 2 feet and to walk on your own, um, emotionally speaking, not just physically speaking. So
Yeah.
practice that again. No matter how old you are, practice being supported and learning to take those steps for yourself, especially emotionally. It will thank you.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant advice. I really love that. And it is interesting because again, it's that connection with something, whether that is supported upright or particularly down on the ground, for me, where
Yes.
we just don't do it. We just don't do it. When
Right. Well,
we will lean up against the wall occasionally, but it's
it's out
interesting,
of
particularly
exhaustion,
it's
right?
out of
We're like,
it's a last resort. It's a total
yes.
last resort. And there's no intention. It's just, as you say, to literally prop you up. And
Yeah.
yet the beautiful thing about the ground particularly is that when you're there as well, there's an invitation to roll around a little bit, to move. You've got
Yes.
so much more freedom to move. There's no particular impact. It doesn't feel risky. You're not going to fall. It's such a place of safety. And yet, how often do
Mhm.
people lie on the ground?
It's also an invitation to pick yourself back up,
Love that.
So it isn't, sometimes we're like, I'm on the ground and that is the rock bottom, right? I'll never get back up. Right. Even physically, as we get older, sometimes we're like, I can't go to the floor. I'll never get back up. I'll need someone to help me. Maybe that's okay. Maybe emotionally, we're also at a place where we need someone else to help us. So if you are able to engage in, laying on the floor for any moment of time, remember that it is always a practice in getting yourself back up and getting through whatever it is that you're, dealing with.
Absolutely brilliant. Perfect endpoint. Absolutely love that. Thank you.
I'm going to go do it now.
You go.
I'm gonna lay
I
down.
literally, I'm desperate. It's so funny, isn't it? As soon as you get that calling, it's like, right, let's just both. It maybe won't look great on the video, but let's just both lie down.
Let's just lay down. We'll do the whole
Lay down
podcast
and
laying
chat.
down.
That would be an interesting video.
So
Oh,
funny.
thank you so much for your time. That was really, really interesting. Such an interesting conversation. I'm sure
Thank
people
you.
will have really, really enjoyed it. And I'm going to be linking you in the show notes to your socials. You're a multi-book author, so we'll link everything on there so that if people want to delve further, then they absolutely can. And also, if you would be so kind as to share perhaps some organizations, both stateside and UK, that if people are interested in dance movement therapy, then that would be really useful as well.
Sure. Yeah. In the States, there's the ADTA, American Dance Therapy Association. The one that comes to mind is the European Association of Dance Movement Therapy.
Perfect.
So yeah,
Great.
at the very least, just search dance therapy and then your region or your continent or your country and it'll pop up.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time, Erica. Really
Thanks,
grateful.
Wendy. Have a great day.
I hope you've enjoyed listening, and if you have, you can help by doing 3 things. First, press the follow button to tell podcast platforms you want to listen again. Second, please give the show a 5-star rating and leave a review about why you liked it. And third, I'd love you to share it with friends and family or on your socials, for which I'm truly thankful. Finally, if this podcast is making you want to start reclaiming your own movement, join me in the Reclaim Movement membership for classes, both live and by replay, and countless videos of mini movement breaks to add into your daily life, covering practical and fun, important natural movements. Visit reclaimmovement.co.uk/membership to get started with your 7-day free trial. See you for the next episode, and thank you so much for listening.